Hello everyone, I'm Aran Dhillon, the Warrington Guardian's local democracy reporter, and I'll be chairing this evening's South Warrington Parish Council's local plan group webinar. First, I just want to thank all those who are tuning in this evening. And just to start, I'll give you a brief outline of the group and its mission, and we'll also introduce the panelists. We'll then show you a video before getting into the question and answer session. So what is the group all about? The South Warrington Parish Council's local plan group consists of 6 parish councils from the south of the borough. It's a cross-party group and was formed to support residents in their opposition to the proposals put forward by Warrington Borough Council for future development. It is also advised by a planning consultant and a barrister. The group accepts that a local plan is needed for Warrington. However, it is concerned that the current plan, called the proposed submission version, is not sound and would be rejected by the inspector at the examination in public. Since it was written, there have been some huge changes globally, nationally, and locally, which the group believes makes it even less sound than before. And for those who aren't aware, in October, Warrington Borough Council actually announced it will be pausing work on the local plan until next summer. The council said this decision was made in response to the impact of COVID-19, along with the government's proposed planning reforms and new housing calculation methodology. The proposed submission version of the local plan set out the legal planning framework for Warrington's development over the next 2 decades, and it put forward proposals for 18,900 new homes up until the year 2037. However, there was widespread anger over a range of proposals in the draft document, which included more than 7,000 homes earmarked for green belt land. The Parish Council's local plan group says the Borough Council's decision to pause work on the plan ensures there is the opportunity to step back and create a new plan for a changing world, which it believes would benefit the whole town. We've got 4 panelists from the group with us this evening, and I'll just introduce them now. We've got Councillor Ryan Bates. Ryan is a Borough Councillor for Grappenhall and Appleton Thorne, and also a member of Grappenhall and Thelwall Parish Council. We've got Warrington South MP Andy Carter, who is also still a Lymm Parish Councillor too. Joe Doherty, a member of Stretton Parish Council, and Sharon Harris, who is a Borough Councillor for Appleton, Hatton, Stretton and Walton, as well as a member of Walton Parish Council. Thank you to the panelists for joining us, and I'm sure they've got plenty to say this evening. But before we get into the question and answer session, we will be showing you a 9-minute video in a moment. Some of you will actually recognise the voice on the video, which is Jim Hancock, former political editor for BBC North West. Following the video, we'll then open up the webinar for questions. And just a few quick points. Those who are tuning in should use the Q&A function on Zoom to submit these to the panel. And please, if you can, ask broad questions of wider interest rather than a detailed, purely about your personal concerns. We cannot guarantee to answer them all, as we are quite limited on time, but we will prepare responses after the event if necessary. And at the end, I'll just go through a few closing details to let you know how you can access the report that the group has produced. We'll now show you the video. Hopefully there are no technical issues, so we'll put that on the screen now.
All local councils, in our case Warrington Borough Council, have to produce a local plan, which establishes where development should take place and where it should not take place. The plan also establishes where there might be opportunities for development which regenerates areas no longer suited to previous uses, and when there might be scope to improve the health and well-being of residents. We know Warrington's councillors and officers have been working hard since at least 2016 to come up with a new plan to replace the current one which was adopted in 2012. This has been hard for all sorts of reasons, including changes in government policy, Brexit, and commitment to major infrastructure investments such as HS2. It's been like trying to hit a moving target. When a detailed version of the plan, the Proposed Submission Version or PSV, was presented for consultation early in 2019, more than 3,500 individuals, groups, businesses, parish councils and community groups from across the whole of Warrington raised concerns about the plan. 6 South Warrington Parish Councils combined to produce a considered comprehensive objection to the plan. The most obvious reason, the headline reason for the parish council's objection, was that the plan proposed a huge expansion of Warrington onto greenfield sites, many in the green belt, in pursuit of development-led growth. But it also seemed clear that the new housing proposed would not be affordable for those who cannot already access the housing market. Even more importantly, a careful analysis of the proposed plan prompted serious concerns over the way in which the development was focused away from the town centre, because this resulted in a demand for major spending on infrastructure, which was inevitably road-based. Parish councillors expressed doubt about Warrington's ability to deliver vast amounts of new infrastructure, transport, schools, health and community facilities to make the plan work. So the proposals in the plan were thought likely to prove undeliverable on the grounds of costs. The new roads, schools and other facilities required by the plan would cost so much there'd be nothing left to invest in schools and infrastructure in the older parts of Warrington. But even if by a miracle the PSV could be shown to be deliverable, it would lead in turn to concern about the environment, with issues for air quality in places already having some of the worst levels of pollution in the country. The plan paid little regard to the health and well-being of those living in less affluent parts of the borough. The parish councillors conclude that if anything, the proposals of the PSV will increase inequality across the borough and perpetuate the gaps already visible in quality of education, employment, opportunity, health and well-being. It was nevertheless our understanding from discussions with the council that despite the obvious lack of consensus over the plan, they intended to present the March 2019 PSV with little or no substantive change for examination in public by a planning inspector. Alongside that disagreement about the content of the 2019 PSV, however, external events have created a new world which is very different now to the one which existed just 18 months ago when the plan was published. And the evidence used to inform the plan, some of which goes back to 2016, is certainly less relevant and by now out of date. And just think what's happened over the last year. An unprecedented viral pandemic which has changed almost everything we do. Economic recession, particularly as a result of the pandemic. A new government with a completely different agenda towards planning and housing development, including the way in which the need for a new housing is calculated. The consequences of leaving the European Union. Decisions made by the government to commit to national infrastructure projects such as HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail. The emergence of previously developed sites available for regeneration, including Fiddler's Ferry and Crossfields. The scope for rail-based logistics based on the former Parkside Colliery site. The conclusions of the local transport plan, which show that transport infrastructure required for the development in the plan cannot be delivered within the plan period. The increasing focus on climate change and air quality, which is out of step with growth proposals relying heavily on road-based transport infrastructure. The need to make sure that the town centre survives, changes across the retail sector because the town centre is also about having work, health, community and educational facilities close to those who need them. Even if only some of these issues prove to have the expected impacts, the plan that's on the table now will be out of date before it's even adopted. None of this is really Warrington Borough Council's fault. In reality, they have little or no control over most of these changes. Parish councils agree that a local plan must be produced, but it thinks that the PSV is the wrong plan. In short, that plan puts the wrong development in the wrong place and would be a disaster for the people and businesses of the town. Parish councillors are encouraged by Warrington Borough Council's recent decision, announced by the leader on October the 2nd, to pause the local plan process. In the announcement, he said, "The local plan will shape Warrington's future and it's vital to get it right." The parish councils agree and think this is the time to bring forward a local plan that responds to recent changes and above all benefits the whole town. That means we need a different plan to the one on the table at the moment, a new plan which much better serves Warrington and the people who live and work here for the rest of the 2020s and into the 2030s. A new plan for a changing world. A new plan should focus more carefully planned development close to and in the centre of Warrington. A new plan should focus more on the railway links which crisscross the town centre and form the base of a sustainable transport system which does not rely on car use. A new plan, including a town centre master plan, could give the council the tools it needs to press to relocate the hospital to a new site in the town centre. Easy to access by public transport, close to town centre housing, and tied in with a new educational and training opportunities based on health sciences. Commitments in a local plan create scope for the council to use tools such as compulsory purchase to make things happen, prompting and facilitating private and public sector investment rather than just waiting for it to happen. A new hospital could be sited close to Central Station, with links into the bus station and the railway station, and access into Golden Square, perhaps using redundant retail space for some outpatient or clinic facilities. Warrington and Halton hospitals employ more than 4,000 people. It would be good for many reasons if some of those staff could live locally and work in central Warrington. The existing hospital site creates an opportunity to redevelop it for housing, affordable, rented, first-time buyers, close to the town centre and with great access to public transport. New rail infrastructure developing into the 2020s and 2030s should be focused on a transport hub around Bank Quay. The current plan already proposes this, but a new plan could take this further. Links to Merseyrail and Metrolink should be considered, using existing infrastructure with modern trains which can run on batteries or switch from diesel to electric. A regenerated Fiddler's Ferry site could host a mixed-use development taking advantage of the fact that railway lines already link it to the town centre and back to Widnes. A new plan could leave a legacy for our children and grandchildren, a town which has recognised its responsibilities for climate change and has set out plans for development which are as sustainable as possible and which improves air quality rather than making it worse. Our proposals for a new plan are just a vision and need more work. There are challenges with deliverability, but we think this is a far more realistic approach for the town as a whole, more suited to the changing world than the current plan preferred by the council. It takes advantage of existing assets, it refocuses activity on the town centre, it avoids building over huge swathes of greenbelt, it delivers the right development in the right places. Importantly, we believe that this vision would address issues of opportunity and inequality across the whole borough. Let's take advantage of the pause caused by COVID. Take a chance to step back, rethink, create a new approach, more suited to a changing world. We ask Warrington Borough Council to work with us and the local MPs and businesses and the people of Warrington to secure what's best for Warrington as a whole, not just house builders and developers. Step back, review, a new plan for a changing world.
We can't hear you, Aran.
So is that better?
Yeah, that's better.
Thank you for the video. Very interesting and informative. We'll get right into the questions now. As mentioned, please do submit your questions and we'll try to get through as many as we can. We'll aim for just one panelist to answer each question. However, if another panelist feels it is important to add something, then that is absolutely fine. The first question, and this one is for you, Ryan. Why does the South Warrington Parishes Group think that now is the time to review Warrington's plan?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Aaron. I think the Borough Council have already done the hard part. They've already pressed the pause button. It's something which we've been asking for some time now. Many parts of the proposed submission version, which itself is, 18 months old, many parts of the planning process began in 2016, maybe before. So a lot of it is increasingly out of date. And just, in 2020, you don't need me to tell you how much of a changing world we've all lived through. So we think that this is a really fantastic opportunity for the council and for the town to look again at how we want to develop over the next 10 to 20 years. And that's exactly why we are making this positive, constructive contribution right now.
Thanks for that, Ryan. And Andy, the next question is for you. There are those who believe other parts of the town have had excessive development over past years, and now it's time for the South to have its fair share. Is this effort from the parish councils not just purely about stopping development on the South Warrington Greenbelt for the benefit of those living in the area in the South?
I think that's a very fair question for people to ask. And I think one of the things that we, of course, have to remember first off is that national planning guidance actually protects Greenbelt and says that you have to develop brownfield sites before you develop the Greenbelt. So we can't really look at South Warrington and not consider all those other areas around the borough where there are brownfield sites or areas that could be regenerated. That's the way that planning guidance requires any organisation putting together a plan, be a development plan or a wider strategic plan for a region. So that's the first thing to say on that. I think the second thing we've got to consider, not just from a planning perspective what's happening here, but from an economic perspective as well. And the real benefits that come from a local plan are designed to make sure that people over the long term that live in that borough benefit overall. And if all of the economic development is happening in one area, then the question that perhaps people in other areas might well be asking is, well, how do we benefit from this? And I would certainly say from a town centre perspective, that's something we've really got to think about carefully. You know, Ryan just touched on there the changes that have happened over the last few years. If you think back to 2016 and imagine what we've gone through to get to where we are today, you know, nobody would have imagined when they started writing these plans where we would be now. And I think when we think about particularly the town centre and the challenge that retail faces and driving footfall into that space for the economic good of the town, that's something we've really got to think about. So that's why I think we do have to think about the regeneration effect and not just building on Greenbelt.
Thanks for that detailed response, Andy. Sharon, I'll put the next question to you. Is there not a risk of extending?
Sorry, could I just
Sorry, Sharon. Yeah, you want?
I was just going to add to what Andy had said, just to sort of point out that whilst we are called the South Warrington Parishes Liaison Group, our rationale is not purely South based. We are trying to reach out to the wider population in Warrington, and you know, it's the local plan affects the whole of Warrington, and we just really want to reach out to everybody. So that was just what I wanted to add to that. Sorry.
Of course, no. Thank you for that, Sharon. And Sharon, if I can put this question to you too, is there not a risk of extending the period where there is actually no up-to-date plan for Warrington?
There is always that possibility, but it's about taking a balanced view on it. If we take a plan forward that proves to be unsound and is not taken forward on that basis, then there will be further delays, and we're back to the drawing board again. This pause gives us the opportunity to rethink and reappraise the work that has already been done. It's not sort of, we're not trying to throw the baby out with bathwater. We're trying to build on what has been done, but to make it more relevant to where we are now. As has already been said, when this plan was envisaged, it was a completely different world, economically and in every which way. Nobody could have foreseen this, and we need to make sure that we've got the right housing in the right places, and also we need to ensure that the infrastructure that goes with that housing is also appropriate and doesn't compound what could be seen as the mistakes of the past, or at the time they were lauded. This town is a car-based town, And, you know, that has always been a characteristic ever since I've been here, nearly 30 years, of Warrington. It was always a positive, but now that positive aspect is turning back in on Warrington and making it a very negative side. So if we can address those issues at the same time, then I think it is all to the good.
Thank you, Sharon. Of course, I mean, irrespective of changing circumstances, the council is still going to be required to meet the government's housing requirements. Joe, if I can just ask you, how does the South Warrington Parishes group actually see these requirements being met without having to resort to the release of greenbelt land?
Thanks, Aaron. Well, clearly, as has been stated before, and certainly on the video, a number of brownfield sites have come to fruition. Now, the existing plan is based from 2017, or the proposals are 2017 to 2037, 20-year plan. Now, clearly, at the moment, the local authority are not hitting the targets within the 17 to 2021 period, which is going to compound the amount of housing required in the inner part of the plan. The reality is, some of the brownfield sites, and they've been mentioned already, will become more available in around about 3 to 4 years from now, when obviously areas are decommissioned and certainly plans are put together. So I think there's a significant amount of brownfield sites which were not available back in 2016 have come to fruition. So that's a big point. The second point is it's about the type of development that we will look to do. Now, I may be getting off the subject slightly, but it's very important because it answers this question about housing and housing need. There will be changes in legislation because the government, as we said, the white paper and looking at housing targets, clearly those are going to change and those need to be amended correctly for this plan. But more importantly, the town centre as it stands, and I'm Warrington born and bred, and I know this town for all my life. The reality is, anybody of my era will know that the town centre is starting to go down because of the economics. So what we've got to look at is somehow coming up with a really urban design for the town centre, which really takes into account some of the opportunities, like the hospital, potentially a university hospital. So, and what you do is cater that to the type of housing required, and also making sure that we've got equality in terms of around the tenure of those properties. So my view is, I think this is a great opportunity for the local authority. They weren't to be aware 4 years ago what was going to happen with some major significant sites coming available. And I think the other thing to really take into account is the vast amount of infrastructure required through the local transport plan 4, which at the moment is very theoretical and very much a blue sky thinking document. The reality is, to make an urban centre in the south would cost significant amounts of money, which could be well-based, spent on the town centre, regenerating it, creating leisure, education, the whole holistic approach. And we've taken that into account. And when we've talked to South Parishes, we've always tried to say what is the best for the whole of the town and bringing everything together, not north, south, east and west, but it's Warrington. And that's where we're coming from.
Thanks, Joe.
If I could add as well, Joe knows this document or this figure as well as I do. He got his background in housing. Development in Warrington has never ever suggested, based on the record, that it will achieve the kind of house building numbers which the post-submission version suggests. Even Russ Bowden, said publicly that these houses which are in the plan may never be built because of that performance issue. So I think what is absolutely essential, just to build on what Joe said, is we have to regenerate our town centre, and we cannot give developers a free choice between the essential regeneration of the town centre and building expensive homes in the green belt, which will be car dependent. We've got to use the plan as a strategic document and tie developers into delivering the future that we want for Warrington, rather than giving them the free choice to develop at the pace they want on the locations that they want.
Thanks, Ryan. Andy, if I could just ask you, I mean, is there an argument that the government is making it near impossible for local authorities, including Warrington, to meet its housing requirements without using greenbelt land?
No, I don't think it is at all. I think if you look at the availability of brownfield land in this area, then actually there's a lot that's currently not on the brownfield register. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed. I mean, one of the conversations I've had as Member of Parliament is with SSE, who are in the process of decommissioning Fiddler's Ferry. Now, Fiddler's Ferry is not included within the plans at all at the moment. It pays, I think, passing mention to the fact that at some point in the future, Fiddler's Ferry will become available. Well, 2 weeks ago, and I published this on my Facebook page, so you know it's there. I had a long conversation with the team at Fiddler's Ferry. They're in the process of decommissioning. They expect that to last about a year. At the end of that period, they'll then go through the process of starting the regeneration of the site, and within 2 to 3 years, there will be areas in that site that are available for development. And that's just simply not included in there. So I think we need to think again about what we're looking at in terms of brownfield sites. But also, as Joe touched on, I think there's a likelihood to see that we will see a change in the number of houses that Warrington need to build. The level that are being proposed at the moment, again, having spoken to developers, I don't actually think is realistic. If you think about the economics of working through a plan that requires, an area the size of Chapelford to be built every couple of years, it's just it's just not going to work. Housing developers don't work like that. So I do think we've got some serious thinking to do around that.
Thanks for that, Andy. Submitted question here. I'll put this one to Ryan. The viewer says they welcome the ideas that are emerging, but how does this work alongside the plans of neighbouring councils and the large economic centres either side of Warrington?
Good point.
Yeah, well, I think every urban area is going to have to rethink their plans. We already saw earlier this year, before the COVID pandemic hit us, we already saw Greater Manchester taking a very close look at their Greenbelt release. They'd recognised that they'd probably made some mistakes with their earlier plans. We've seen Halton significantly reduce their loss of green belt, which has been a massive positive for people in neighbouring communities like Moore, which would have been decimated under their original draft proposals, which have now been changed. So I think what you've seen in all neighbouring areas, or in most neighbouring areas, is authorities looking again, realising that the world is changing, that there are new economic pressures, particularly on the high street, as Andy said. Also recognising that we need to be far more sensitive and long-term in our thinking around protecting the environment. And once the green belt is gone, it has gone. And we've got to protect that, not just from a housing development point of view, but as a real asset, which isn't just about the communities where that green belt is wrapped around. It's about the whole of one. It's actually even wider in scale. So I think we've seen some really good examples of local leaders like Andy Burnham recognising that planning has got to change for the 2020s, and I hope that Warrington's leaders can do the same.
Thanks for that, Ryan. I think many would agree that Warrington's current level of infrastructure would struggle to accommodate major new developments. And a great question here submitted from another viewer. They've asked, I'll put this one to Sharon. They've asked, can Section 106 payments from developers not provide for all the infrastructure requirements of development?
You're on mute, Sharon.
I'm muted. Sorry about that. Yeah, Section 106 money has historically been used for infrastructure. And where it sort of still continues, it will make that contribution. I would think that there will be, with the housing white paper, though I don't know, Andy will know more about this than myself, so I might pass it over to him. But I think that there will be mechanisms which will possibly help in that respect. So.
Yeah, I mean, there is a proposal in the white paper, and obviously at the moment it's still being consulted on, that Section 106 would disappear and a new infrastructure levy would be put in place. And that would allow some of the development that's needed around infrastructure to take place first. But, I'm not sure that that will be in place in time necessarily for all of this development to come in. So I don't think we should really rely on that as a funding mechanism for the proposals that are required. I mean, I think one of the things that I've been working on, and you know, we've seen the sort of investment come into the town centre recently through the town deal this week. We've got to look at every opportunity of putting infrastructure funding in early and doing the work early, because that will pay off over the long term. And I think one of the really, really important things that we've got to think about, if you want to attract people to live in Warrington, and you know, there is no doubt we do have a need to build more houses for the future. You know, I think about my 12-year-old in 10 years time, you know, for him to get on the housing ladder, it's going to be a challenge, and we need to make sure we can address that for our children in the future. But we've got to create a nice place for people to want to come and live. And you know, if we don't have a nice environment and people can look around and choose to go somewhere else, then they'll do that. And I think, you know, we've not really explored some of the great assets that Warrington has in the town centre. I mean, the opportunity to create some form of river city living, and I don't use the city word, you know, sort of lightly, to start to take that riverfront and reshape and you know, refashion that. It could be a really, really attractive town centre with really lovely housing, and I think that's the real opportunity that sits there for Warrington. And obviously we've got big brownfield sites surrounding us that we can use as well. But looking at the way that we do things in the town would really make it an attractive place to live.
Can I just add to what Andy's just said about the town centre? I mean, the town centre is vital in all of this, and the redevelopment, the potential to regenerate the town centre now is huge if we focus on the town centre in a way that possibly hasn't been thought of before. Because if you can make it a place where people can actually live, work and play without having to go get in a car and drive anywhere, it will be a very desirable place to live, and it can be an intergenerational place to live as well. And by doing that, if you've got the good transport, sort of rail transport links elsewhere, it will be a really, really wonderful place. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon and Andy. Joe, if I could just ask you, do you believe thousands of new homes in the town would bring real achievable opportunities for our children to be able to afford to buy houses in the future?
Thanks, Aran. I mean, it's a very good question. The reality is we do need to build new homes. Nobody is saying that's not the case. But, and I'm sorry if I mentioned the south, because I'll come from that and I'll come back through the compass to the north. The reality is that the south, what's being currently proposed, significantly fails in terms of infrastructure. It fails in, I think there's one plan to put a major road, like a ring, not a ring road, but a distributor road, a dual carriageway. I don't know why it should be a dual carriageway, but no other roads are dual carriageway within the area. But the reality is that is all it's going to do is connect up the suburbs of the estate. It doesn't do anything to move traffic. In fact, it clogs traffic up. And I'd be interested to find out at a later date who's proposing those designs for that. But in terms of there is bound to be some development in the south, and we accept that. The reality is, it's the type of development. Now, if you're going to build homes in the south, which are going to be outside of people's budgets, certainly young people's budgets, and with a small number of affordable homes, and shared ownership is an option, but it's not a thing that the marketplace is that keen on, unfortunately. But the reality is, it's small numbers compared to the overall. It will also be led by demand. And that's been touched on earlier tonight. And the reality is the existing developments that are being built in the south are behind schedule by significant amount. And it's about demand. And in this current climate, of course, nobody knows the certainty of the economic front. The reality is what we're saying is that we should be focusing on moving the housing, if possible, to the areas which we've touched on, the brownfield sites, which could be 3 to 4 years from now, giving plenty of time to think about it. And I would say, if we're looking at Fiddler's Ferry in particular, we shouldn't be just building loads of houses there. We should be looking at, like the Victorians did, they actually believed in green space and parks and recreation. And we shouldn't lose sight of that. And in fact, there's lots of cases in Warrington throughout all areas in Warrington where the likes of Orford Park, the likes of Victoria Park, I mean, where those things need to be developed out, and that's where money could be spent and enjoyment. The success of the Orford Centre, the Jubilee, is it called the Jubilee Centre? I'm pretty certain it's called Jubilee. It's booked out, it's fully occupied. So what we should be looking at is better using our resources to create homes, as Sharon said earlier, that where people can work, play, and also enjoy their lives and be proud of where they live. Not be afraid to say where they come from in any part of Warrington. It should be absolutely equality throughout. And that's what I believe we should be. My previous role as the Chief Exec of the Housing Association, we pushed that all the way through in everything we did. And my view is that's something that Warrington needs to think about and maybe utilise some of the skills on this panel and on the panel in the north and pull us all together to work in unison. Now, I know that's gone a little bit beyond the 5,000 to 6,000 homes, but I would also say Warrington should have a labour strategy, a partnership strategy with developers, because clearly the amount of investment that will happen needs to be linked to employment of local people, properly linked, and not playing lip service to it. And there is lots of good examples throughout the Northwest where that's been achieved. And I'm happy to talk to anybody how that could be done, personally, because I've been involved in it. So all I'm saying is that it's such a big facet to the whole of this, is actually by just not building the homes, is actually utilising that as a medium to actually create work and employment as well. I'm sorry, I got a little bit carried away there, but I do apologise.
Thanks for that, Joe. Really, really detailed, great informative answer. Andy, if I could just ask you the next question. I mean, as we prepare for thousands of new homes, are you confident that the Centre Park Link Road and the proposed Western Link will bring an end to the town's congestion nightmare?
I think the answer to that is, until we really see what the details of the local plan are, we don't know the answer to that. If you build all the houses in a place where there is no benefit from the Western Link, then perhaps that's not the case. And I think that's why you've got to have joined up thinking around this. You've got to put the transport issues and the development issues and the economic issues all into one place. Now, I know there's already work taking place on assessments around the Western Link in particular. Obviously, we're further ahead with the one in the town centre, but planning permission hasn't yet been granted. There's still work to be done, and I think putting the big picture together and not planning by piecemeal is really, really important. So I'm glad that they're pausing with this. I'm glad they're pausing with the local plan, but we've got to start to think about planning not by piecemeal and really starting to it all to take shape in one thought.
Can I just add to that? Yeah, it's great that we're having this opportunity to rethink the local plan. It is also the ideal opportunity to pause and rethink a local transport plan for. We've got the Centre Park Link, which is almost complete, and hopefully that will solve a lot of the issues, traffic clogging up the town centre. It surely now would be a good time to pause with the Western Link before ploughing ahead with a very expensive project. That money could be used elsewhere quite well, I'm sure. Why don't we just see what the results, what the effect of the Centre Park Link is, how successful that is, before proceeding further with the Western Link. I know some work has been done on the Western Link, but it's not so far advanced that it couldn't stop and have another pause for thought.
Can I just come back, Aran? One final thought. I think one of the biggest pieces of correspondence I get into my inbox is around congestion. Traveling through the town is a problem. There's no doubt about that. I spend all my time at the moment when I'm here in Warrington going from one side of the Ship Canal to another, and certainly getting around Bridgefoot is a nightmare. So I'm really looking forward to the town centre scheme opening. But I talk to people that live on the south in Appleton, in Stretton, around that area, who talk about wanting to apply for jobs in the north of Warrington. but they don't, because they think I'll never get there in time, having dropped my children. I can't get there. The economic barrier of congestion is a real problem for us. So we do need to address this. I think the point that Sharon is making, and the point I'm certainly making, is joined up thinking is really, really important. I think we've got enough time, given where we are with the Western Link and the fact that planning has not yet been approved, to make sure that we're bringing all these things together.
Can I come in, Aran, on this? I mean, we did a lot of work on the local transport plan for in the consultation period, which the local authorities were very good. They didn't have to consult, but they did, and they did this in unison with the local plan. And there's a lot of detailed responses from very well qualified people in that profession in terms of civils who did a report. My concern on the Western Link is very much, and I know that the local authority are saying that they're happy with the budget, but the budget for this scheme is extremely, sounds a lot of money, 200 million, but this is an extremely complicated piece of work, and it's a single carriageway construction, which they've already admitted themselves, the officers, to me in person, that they felt that, because I asked the question, why isn't it not dual carriageway? They said, well, we couldn't afford that scheme. Well, we should be building something, first of all, that is inadequate to start with, but secondly, the construction costs in the last 12 months are spiraling out of control at the moment. And my major worry is that the local authority gets far down this route and suddenly the budgets go way over. And that will be a complete embarrassment to the local authority, because the governments are only guaranteeing a small amount. Therefore, you'd have to go back to the government, cap in hand, to try and get further grant funding. And the likelihood of that in this current climate is going to be pretty remote. With all the pressures that are being put on the budgets, on the economy. So I would suggest that, as Sharon said, possibly we've got time. There's no rush with this, because costs are going to go up anyway. We can't stop that. Is to pause, see how this central link works, how successful it is. The reality is the majority of the traffic coming across that Western Link isn't going to be really from Appleton or Walton. It's going to be mostly traffic coming off the M56, trying to get through to the other side of Warrington and avoid the toll charges on the bridge. So the reality is, let's think more about what the needs of Warrington are, Warrington residents, rather than people who are using it as a diversion to cut across to avoid paying the tolls. But anyway, I don't want to be too political about it, but I think there needs to be a pause. I suggest a strong pause and have a real good think about the costings.
Thanks, Joe. Submitted question. I'll put this one to Ryan, if we can get your views. The viewer has asked, the planning white paper suggests a different approach to local plans. Is the process that we consider just a waste of time? And should we be preparing for a new process for local plans?
Good point.
It's a really good question, and doesn't in any way tempt me into quite political territory, isn't it? No, I think that if you read the white paper and the various information around it, it would suggest that once legislation is in place with the new planning system, and Andy, I'm sure, will be able to tell us more about that, then there will be a requirement for all local authorities to get a local plan by the new system within a relatively short time scale. You're talking about probably 2 years, I think. There's an expectation for many authorities to have those new local plans in place by the end of the current Parliament. So to some degree, you might argue, are we wasting our time, with what we're doing now? And I think the truth is, now that they've pressed the pause button, whether they continue with the PSV in some guise or whether they wait on the government's legislation, which of course there's still consultations going on around that planning white paper, I think that really doesn't bother me as much as making sure that the content is right, whether it's the current local plan making system or the new local plan making system. What we have to make sure the content is right. Now, in my opinion, and lots of other people's opinions, 4,500 responses to the various consultations over the past 3 years. We don't think the content's right at the moment. We've not got the right homes in the right places with the right jobs and the right infrastructure. So whether we proceed with the current local plan making system or wait for the new one, I think we've got to make sure that it's the right plan for Warrington. We're not there yet, in my opinion, and I would hope that whether we carry on or whether we wait for the new system, that we can get a better plan. And there are some aspects of the planning white paper which give me some confidence that we can actually get a better plan for Warrington more easily. And there are some question marks over the white paper, not just from me, but from various professional bodies working in planning and environment and heritage and conservation. So let's wait rather than speculate about exactly when and what this new system will look like. But in the meantime, I think what's really important is that the Borough Council engage not just with the South Warrington Parishes, but with all groups around Warrington who were concerned about what the local plan currently looks like, and make sure we get a better plan which works for the whole of Warrington.
Thanks, Ryan. Andy, is there anything you want to add there?
No, I think Ryan answered it politically very well. I think probably the only thing I would add on is, whenever the plan is submitted, whatever plan is submitted, it will have to go past an independent inspection, and they'll want to check that it's sound. And I think as it currently sits, I think all of us agree it isn't sound. Yeah. It can't be delivered. And the test of soundness is, can it be delivered? And the answer is no.
Can I add, Aaron?
Thanks.
I think I mentioned it earlier in the debate, but the current plan is based on commencement date for housing numbers from 2017. Now, the local authority themselves, maybe who's listening to that, they know that those figures are, the first year's figures were part of the plan. They're significantly behind programme already, and we're only 2 years in. And I think we mentioned earlier that if by trying to catch up, you'll be having to build in the year 5 to 10 period in the region of 18 to 1900 homes a year delivered, finished. That's not going to happen. You'd have to have 20 developers on site at any one time, and the demand for housing. So why have a plan that's not deliverable? The second point I'd really like to make, which is in regard to what the white paper is, why put a plan in place that's not going to be delivered? Who in the right mind would do that? The second point is really the time scale. Why are we going for 20 years when we can go for 15 or down to 10? I would suggest, personally, 15 years, which would still take you to the end date of 2037 if we commenced in 2022, having had a really good think, I'd put some urban plans into place, had a look at some of the employment and partnership strategies, and put the whole thing together under the regeneration heading. And that, for me, is the way forward now. The Warrington had the Warrington New Town, Runcorn had Runcorn New Town. They did some good work, they did some bad, they learned from it. But let's learn from some of the mistakes that were made and build on the successes. And there's some great successes in Warrington, there really is. And there's some good stuff being done now. And, we're not here to knock what's being done. There's some great stuff being done. But what it needs now is some real capital investment. And that's why I'm extremely worried, not because of South or not. I'm worried that we're not spending those limited resources to the real benefits of our young people and our grandchildren in the future. As Andy said, he wants his child who's grown up, and I've got grandchildren. My oldest grandchild's 21. It was 21 the other day. So there we go. So I want her to be able to buy, like I did, starter homes, and then moved on to something better, or go into rented. Nothing wrong with renting either. I come from Orford. I was born in Orford, Poplars Avenue, and I have great respect for every great friends there. So that's not quite the white paper, but it's more realistic in my view. Go for a shorter period, keep the same end date.
Of course. Thanks for that response. Andy, I just want to put this next question to you. I know you've mentioned Fiddler's Ferry earlier this evening. Question asks, if new development does not happen in the Greenbelt, where can it go? And of course, aside from Fiddler's Ferry, there may be potential for the current hospital site in the future, or that may be some years off. Andy, I just want to really ask, are there any other particular sites that you are sort of currently looking at as to where we could build on instead of the proposed Greenbelt land?
Well, obviously we've talked about Fiddler's Ferry, and I think we've really got to make sure that is included in the plan. It's such a large site, so well connected in terms of rail links. It would be just criminal to not include that on the plan. I think you mentioned there the hospital site. I think realistically we're talking probably 10 years until we see a new hospital being built, although we've got a lot of work to do now to try and secure that. And that if that is the case, and if it moves from that current site on Lovely Lane, it will it will generate probably about 400, 500 home in that sort of area. I think we can think differently about the town centre. I think some different types of development happening in the town centre, and I talked about riverside developments. I think that's a big opportunity, and obviously the Crossfields site, or certainly the Unilever site, is likely to become available and a possible development site. But there are also other sites in the town, and it's not right for me from a commercial perspective to name them, but there are other sites in the town that I know are potential for development zones that we could look at there as well. And I think probably the other one that is already looking at for development is the current bus depot. That site will move, and there will be an opportunity to build there and sort of backwards into Latchford. So those two areas are real potentials for growth as well. But I do think, the density at which we're currently considering perhaps could change as well. And I think if we're going to change the use of our town centre from just really being a retail zone to being much more mixed use, then housing as part of that mixed use is really important.
Aran, can I just mention one point? It's not just about new homes as well. Parts of the town centre would really benefit from grant improvements to really upgrade some of the existing housing, which could really, brighten the area and give really good living conditions for people. So I think part of some money should be ring fenced in terms of looking about existing stock, which needs to be, brought up to 21st century homes. So that's stuff that's been done in many local authorities before. I know Warrington have done it as well, but I think that needs to be brought back into the equation now. It's around upgrading and giving people the quality of lives better where people currently live.
Aran, could I just add to that?
Of course.
Obviously, COVID has made a huge difference to the way we are all working now. We're all learning to work from home, and offices are less well used, and there may be a realignment, a readjustment of how businesses view office space. So office space also may come up to be available for repurposing into nice places to live. So it's another thought to think of. Yeah.
Cool. Just coming towards the end, I'll have one more question, I think. This is just on a potential tram system for the town. Ryan, if I can ask you, do you think that is the right way to move forward for Warrington, a new tram system?
Well, I am obviously not a public transport expert or a public transport consultant, but I certainly think that if you look at congestion around Warrington, there is only one reason for that, and that is our dependency on cars. And that's just the fact of town planning over the past half a century. We have created a car-dependent society, and Warrington is no different. Obviously, we have accentuated problems, I guess, because we are boxed in by motorways and we are crisscrossed by waterways. So, yes, we have more bottlenecks probably than any other urban area of a similar population of 210,000. So we've got to have a mass transit system. I'm absolutely convinced by that. And I know that the Borough Council are also convinced by that. The big question mark is what that mass transit system will look like. Will it be guided buses? Will it be a rapid light rail system? We just don't know yet. We do know that the Borough Council have commissioned some studies into exactly what that rapid transit system will look like. And in my opinion, as with so many other things, in hindsight's a great thing, and it's easy for me to sit here and make these kind of criticisms. I don't know why we have left it so late to get into those studies. So I think we do need that rapid transit system, and we need to start work on it as quickly as possible. We're going to reduce congestion. That will have economic benefits, it will have social benefits, and obviously it will have massive environmental benefits, not least in terms of air quality. Will that be a tram system? I just don't know. I can see the real benefits of that. I can see some challenges with that, and I look forward to seeing those consultant reports coming back very, very soon, hopefully. So we'll see. What I do know, however, is that for a similar amount of money to the investment in the Warrington Western Link, we would have a light rail system in Warrington if that were the option we went for. So that's the kind of investment you're looking for if it was to be done on a reasonable scale, which would have a big impact on the town. So we'll watch and wait, and I, for one, will be making sure that that study happens as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Ryan. Does anyone else wish to come in on that?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a really important tool that could change the face of Warrington. It would make it very much easier place to live in terms of connectivity, and could link very easily into Manchester and into Liverpool. And that would take a huge number of cars off the local motorway network, let alone the internal road network. And that in turn would make a huge difference to the air quality in Warrington, which we know is quite bad. And, you know, trams per se, if they're the right kind of tram, steel on steel, not rubber based, that is what will make a difference to the air quality, because it's the non-particulate emissions that actually make the air that we breathe so poisonous, and does affect our health, our mental health and our well-being. So I, for one, would be very, very anxious to see a tram network implemented as soon as possible, because all other forms of transport could then be developed in a way that would sustain, they would be interchangeable. You'd be able to ride your bike and get on a tram and find yourself in Liverpool. You know, it's that ease of transport that will encourage people out of cars, basically. Maybe it's not quite that simple, Andy.
Aran, can I just come in the back of that? It's a bit of a shock if you get on a tram and suddenly find yourself in Liverpool and you want to go to Latchford. But
yeah.
I think
you meaning to go there.
Sharon knows this because she joined me at the last event we had. I'm the chair of the all-party parliamentary group for light rail, so I spend quite a bit of time looking at this sort of project. I think there's a couple of things I would say. Warrington are quite some way down the route of electric buses, and the council's preferred method at the moment is an electric bus fleet. They put some bidding in. I don't know whether they'll be successful for that, but it could be that Warrington, bearing in mind that Warrington has a municipal bus company, then there's obviously interest from the council to support their bus operator. So there are some issues that Warrington has to obviously consider from that perspective. I think the other thing I would say is, you know, from a tram perspective, people tend to think about the Metrolink as sort of that's quite an outdated sort of way of operating trams now. You know, the opportunity to look at things like hydrogen-based trams that run in a very, very different way, that are much smaller, that don't need the level of infrastructure, and as Sharon said, you know, are operating in a much more sustainable and green way, could be absolutely something that could be considered for Warrington. And I think, you know, we tend to think that it only works in cities. If you go and look at other parts of Europe, towns about the same size of Warrington have got really, really good tram systems. But again, there's a political choice being made by the council at the moment to put money behind the electric bus fleet.
Thank you, Andy. I think that brings the question and answers to a close. In a moment, I will give each of the panelists just a final few seconds to make a closing statement. But just before that, just a few final comments from myself. As I mentioned before, Warrington Borough Council has announced that they are pausing work on the local plan until next summer. And with everything that is going on in the world at the moment, who knows what the future holds? If you do sympathise with what the parish councils group is saying, you're to lobby your borough councillors and parish and town councillors, if you have them, to put pressure on the borough council to take account of the views put forward tonight. And if you want to watch the video again, which was played earlier, you can access that via the link that I'll put on the Warrington Guardian website tomorrow. Furthermore, if you want to read the reports, they will also be available via the link on our website tomorrow. There's a 1-page summary with diagrams, a 4-page executive summary, and the full 16-page report. Furthermore, 20 questions that we haven't been able to answer along with others, they'll be available on the Grappenhall and Thelwell Parish Council website tomorrow, I believe. And just to finish then, I'll go to all of the panelists just to see if they've got any final statements to make. Andy, if we can start with yourself, please.
Well, look, the Borough Council have been at this for 5 years, and we've got another chance to revisit in the light of so many things that have changed over the last few months. You know, you look at COVID and Brexit and new land availability. This pause, both for planning reform and to take account of what's happening in the world, is an opportunity to look at how we do things differently and deliver for Warrington in a more sustainable way. I think it's probably fair to say, and I should sort of declare my hand right at the end, that whilst all the parishes here tonight are south of the Ship Canal, I of course represent many more thousands of constituents north of the Ship Canal. So I can speak for people in Penketh and Great Sankey, and most importantly, the majority of the town centre falls into my constituency as well. So my interest isn't just what's going on in the south of the town, it's thinking about the 86,000 people that live in Warrington South. And just this week, we've seen £22 million from the government for developing and reinvesting in our town centre, because the future of our towns is really, really important. We've got the opportunity to push for a new hospital. We've got the opportunity to think about things in a very different way. And I think finally, the one thing I would touch on, and we've not really talked about this, Northern Powerhouse Rail and a hub in Warrington linking with the West Coast Main Line really gives Warrington an opportunity and an advantage over other towns in the Northwest that we really have to take and grab hold of. So that would be my key message to the council. Think about what we're doing for the town and base it from the town centre.
Thanks, Andy. And Ryan, to you next.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Obviously, going second, let alone fourth, is always the most difficult place. But, you know, as we said earlier, some aspects of Warrington Borough Council's plan date back to 2016, perhaps even earlier. And we know that the world has changed, not just COVID-19 and economic uncertainties around both the pandemic and Brexit, but also an increased concern, quite rightly, for the climate emergency, and also here in Warrington, the air quality crisis, which we seem to be living with and almost sleepwalking through on a daily basis. The Borough Council have already done the hard part in many ways. They've admitted that they had to press the pause button, and they have pressed pause. What's really important now is that the council don't just wait 6 months and then press on regardless, which is pretty much what they've got a track record of doing, I'm sorry to say. We've got to take this chance to take stock, to look at how things have changed, and to get a much better plan, which will create the town which we all want to live in, we all want to be proud of being from for the next 10, 20, 30 years. You know, that's the legacy which we're talking about. So we've got to get the right homes, the right places, with the right infrastructure and the right jobs. I'm sure we can do that, but we're only going to do that by having a discussion, by having a dialogue. And that's exactly what the South Warrington Parishes have tried to do, make a positive, constructive contribution. And we hope that the Borough Council will listen. And to echo your remarks, Aaron, those on the call tonight, if they can encourage parish councils, borough councillors to engage with this document, to take it in the spirit with which it was intended, which was to try and get a better plan for the whole of Warrington, then that would be a real success and a step in the right direction. Thank you. Thanks,
Ryan. Sharon, if I can come to you next, please.
Yeah, well, for me, I really hope, as has already been said, you know, the Borough Council have taken the hard step now to pause the local plan. I really hope that this is an opportunity that they will grab with both hands to engage with us, but not just us, but the wider Warrington population. And it would be great for other councillors in other parts of the borough to contact us and engage with us, because I think we'll probably all be saying the same thing. And you know, there's strength in unity, and there's strength in voicing those opinions together. So I hope that will be one outcome from this evening. Also, for me, the Local Transport Plan 4 is an integral part of the whole discussion. And again, I feel that needs to come hand in hand with the local plan. And that will shape the whole town, as we've already discussed. You know, rather than building satellite housing estates on the outskirts of the town where we need road infrastructure, more imagination will actually make the town a healthier place to live, because there'll be fewer air quality issues. And also, if we take this approach, I think we will be sort of levelling up the inequalities that we know stubbornly exist in Warrington. Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon. And last but certainly not least, to you, Joe.
Oh, thanks, Aaron. I'm not going to repeat what the other panelists have said, but I mean, all decision makers in the country at the moment, and in fact through Europe, in fact through the world, they're at a crossroads. Probably the first major pandemic since the First World War, major economic issues facing us, certainly great fear for our children, their grandchildren, their futures. But I think Warrington decision makers, and I mean that in totality, not party based, they all need to work together and think about the decisions they're going to make over the next 12 months. And they need to be based on what's realistic and what is the best for our residents. And my greatest, or I can't think of the right words without getting too passionate about it, but I would really want to believe that those members who make those decisions are going to be brave people, not sitting back on their egos and thinking, well, we've done all this work and we've spent all this money on consultants and we're going to just drive this forward and let the Secretary of State make the decision for us. Actually sit back, engage with people like ourselves, engage with people from all of the town. Don't be afraid, because everybody's in the same position. You're not on your own, and actually become a beacon for this. Be shown that actually we will work the democratic process, and we will enlist not just old foggies like me, but bring young people into this debate. Really start to rethink. This original plan in 2016 was born out of the 2014 High Court challenge, I believe, to the existing plan. Actually, that's maybe a good thing, because what we're now looking at is a completely changing world, and we need to, the high streets at that time, 4 or 5 years ago, were still okay. They're not okay. Walk down Warrington now, they're not. So this is the biggest opportunity we will all have in actually to make not just the local plan, but the regeneration plan of Warrington be successful. And, you know, I hope I'm involved in that, and I hope that I can support the council to that effect.
Thanks, Joe. I just want to thank everyone who has tuned in this evening, and of course the panelists, Andy, Ryan, Sharon and Joe. It's been a very insightful and informative discussion. It's been wonderful to chair the session. Thank you, everyone. I hope you found it interesting. Good evening.
Good evening.